Welcome to the Only Dream Big podcast, starring your host, Donnie Bedney. Only Dream Big is a podcast where Donnie will share tips and experiences on different topics, such as acquisition entrepreneurship, human capital, and the future of the workforce. He is the president of PSP Metrics and has been in the assessment and human capital management industry for more than 15 years, with the goal of driving change through people. As your guide on dreaming big, let's hear from the man himself.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Only Dream Big pod. I'm your host, Donnie Bedney, and so excited today to have an amazing guest who I know is going to drop some nuggets, just because from our pre-brief conversations and otherwise, she has dropped a number of gems into my life. LaDavia Drane. LaDavia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Donnie.
So, we want to hop right in, excited to hear from you and learn more from you and just your amazing journey. I think you continue to be just a great example of somebody who literally lives out our theme of only dreaming big, because I've just watched your career and kind of continue to just dream bigger and bigger every time. And so, can you take us back and either from, frankly, as early as you want to, in your life, but did you see yourself kind of, playing significant, roles in global, organizations and all of that kind of stuff as a child? Or, was it kind of standard, like, hey, I want to be a doctor when I grow up, or, anything else?
Yeah. Well, Donnie, you're making me go back, right, and really think about this. But so when I was a kid, I was really bossy. At least that's what people told me. I was a bossy kid, and I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I went straight into I went straight to law school. So, and then into a legal career after college. And I think that it was then that I realized that there was something bigger that I was meant to be, even than being a lawyer. Right. And even though I didn't know exactly what it looked like beyond lawyering, I knew what it meant to feel small, and I did not want to feel small, right? So being in situations when someone either is talking down to you or someone's deciding what you should do and where you should go, like what your path should be, that always made me feel small. And so I identified that. So, I knew that there was something bigger, didn't know exactly what it was, but one thing I knew for sure is that I would not allow myself to be in a professional situation where I feel small.
Okay. That is powerful. Very, very powerful. And so I know a little bit before you were referring to, some significant moments. I'd probably refer to it as like a watershed moment, but you referred to it as like a crucible moment. Can you talk through, maybe, because I know I would say, at least as I've watched your career, like you've kind of had a few crucible moments,
I have.
in your life. And so can you, kind of explain to our listeners, like, what a crucible moment is and, kind of what's brought you to kind of this most recent crucible moment that you've had?
Yeah, crucible moment, it's a term that we use at Amazon. We have a lot of these quirky terms that we use. And so that's one. And basically, it's a point in which something in your career, it turns, right? You become this transformational leader. You go to that next level. And even though I've had a number of crucible moments in my career, I'll talk to you about the one that was most recent for me, because it was a turning point for me before I came into this role, which is, I'd say by far, the largest role that I've had when I think of scope, impact. This role right now, I'm the global inclusion, diversity, and equity leader for Amazon Web Services. So think of that as like a chief diversity officer, but for Amazon Web Services, large cloud computing company, big impact around the globe, right? And so when this happened, it was 2020. You may recall COVID-19 was really, I don't know if it was just on the rise at this point. This was May 2020. So I think it was peaking, right? A lot of people getting sick, a lot of people dying. And at the same time, racial unrest broke out, right? Again, right? So we're not saying that this was the first time, but once again, in the cases, I think so many of us, we were glued to the TV because of COVID-19 and we were home, right? We were all working from home. And a lot of people were also losing their jobs. So a lot of
Mm.
folks at home. So you had the full attention, right? My full attention was there on the
Mhm.
television. And Ahmaud Arbery had
Mm.
been murdered months previously, but it
Mhm.
all bubbled up in May. And
Mhm.
so I'm at Amazon Web Services, newly transferred over from the public policy shop. I was lobbying for the company before then.
Mhm.
And I could tell that employees needed to have a conversation about what was happening. We didn't know
Mm.
what was happening. We
Mhm.
look back now and we realize exactly what moment we were in. But back
Yeah.
then, we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
particular, Black men were hurting, right? So this
Oof.
is me seeing Black men in my life, personally and
Mhm.
professionally,
Mhm.
literally crying, right? And so I
Man.
knew
Mhm.
that we needed to have a conversation.
Yep.
So it's not something that Amazon had done before then, right? We didn't have a company-wide conversation about a Black man being murdered by white
Mm.
men in Georgia, right? It had never
Mm.
happened before. And
Mhm.
so, and this is when I want to say the verdict hadn't come yet.
Sure.
It was more of a conversation then, but our employees needed it. And so I
Mhm.
wrote an email and I teed it up. And the response that I received
Wow.
was like no other, right? It wasn't
Mm.
positive for
Mhm.
the people that I needed to get approval from, or at least I
Mhm.
thought I needed to get approval from. That's also
Mhm.
something that I learned. There's something
Mm.
about letting someone inform your decision, consult
Mm.
on your decision, but not necessarily approve your decision, right?
Mm.
And so I was seeking approval. And it was as if I was asking for, something that was just unheard of, right?
Sure. Yep.
What would be the result?
Mhm.
What would be the external response? Is this
Mhm.
something that our customers would expect us to do? All these different hypotheticals, right?
Yep.
And so I remember letting all these different folks uh, weigh in, and they would
Mhm.
add people and add more people. They added my leader,
CC, CC,
CC,
CC.
CC, right? Not even BCC, CC. And so I waited. I let it go on for at least 5 hours. And when we got to about 10 p.m.
Mhm.
Eastern time, I decided to reply. And I gave it everything that I had, right?
Mm.
And I ended with, if this is the type of company this is, then
Mhm.
I don't belong here. And no one of color should feel safe here, right?
Mhm.
And that
Woo.
completely changed the conversation. And for
Yeah.
me, it took courage, right? I
Absolutely.
actually have a job during the
Mhm.
COVID-19 pandemic. I'm working from home. I'm able to spend more time with my husband and my children,
Yep.
but at that moment, I knew I had to take that stance. And so for me,
Mm.
that was a crucible moment. Of course, we had the conversation. Everything was
Yep.
fine. Employees were really excited. They were happy that we were willing to have the
Yeah.
conversation. Then we went on to have two or three others. But in that moment, I knew that our employees needed us.
Mm.
And I knew exactly what it is that they needed, and we needed
Yep.
to deliver for them. The
Yeah.
same way we deliver for our customers, because we're so
Yep.
customer obsessed. We
Mhm.
needed to deliver for our employees.
Mm. 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 Powerful. Um, Powerful for so many reasons. I was actually around that time actually in another organization myself, and not as global of an impact, but I actually felt impressed one morning to send a note myself, and it was titled "Suffering in Silence," and it was actually more broadly just about people of color at the company, because at that point I was in some sort of group meeting, and my team, the conversation that my team had was, what are we all going to do? What's the first thing we're going to do when everything goes back to normal?
Mm,
And I'm sitting on this call, the only person that, looks like you or I on this call. And people are already like planning their vacations based
wow.
on like this, state of discomfort, if you will, that they're or inconvenience that they're in. And simultaneously, I'm saying like, man, I'm feeling wild right now.
Right.
And maybe I should go for a run. But
Mhm.
I can't go for a run because maybe somebody's going to hunt me down.
That's right.
I'd love to stay in my house, but who knows? Maybe my house is too nice, and people say like, "Oh, I saw this person who
That's right.
doesn't look like they should be in this neighborhood." Call the police. The police come in, and before
That's
they
right.
ask, before asking questions about this being my home, I could also. So, in that state, what do I do?
Yep.
And so, I think that there's been a lot of great conversations that have come up. That's actually why, I refer to this time that we're living in as a black swan event, right? I'm sure
Mhm.
you're familiar with black swans, but just continuing to believe that the level of change, the amount of innovation, all
Yeah.
of that is accelerated during these times. And I truly believe that over this next decade, we're going to look completely different as a country. As you look at businesses and industries,
Yep.
folks like yourself continuing to lead out in change. And to your point, it's because of all of those unique factors about this time. The fact that people are at home,
Right.
glued to television without the typical distractions that have occurred, have made it just an ideal time to be willing to take those steps of courage. And so, thank you so much for sharing that. Pivoting a little bit, but to something that you actually shared. Can you unpack a little bit more? That whole piece around not seeking approval,
Right.
right? Because I can only imagine that in your career, as you've been able to have more crucible moments, um, how impactful has it been when you've been willing to make a decision, right, and just take that next step, moment of courage, not seeking approval, but kind of trusting your gut
Right.
or a value or a belief, and just unpacking that for our listeners a little bit, because I think it'll be really encouraging for folks who are that one moment, uh, making a decision to be courageous,
Yeah.
and the impact that it could have on your career.
You said the word courageous, and that's the exact word that I was thinking, right? It takes courage and it takes experience,
Hmm.
because a part of it is you have to know, at least have good idea of what the
Sure.
outcome could be or would be,
Absolutely.
right?
Hmm.
And as a lawyer, I'm always thinking in that way, like, you know the answer to the question before you ask the question. And so
Sure.
eh, that is probably the beginning of me not seeking approval, right?
Mm. Hmm.
Because before then, I had worked on Capitol Hill. I had worked
Hmm.
for members of Congress. I was pretty much that member, right?
Sure.
Reincarnated. So I'm the one that would deliver, but what they would expect to be delivered. So I was
Got it.
always seeking approval, right?
Mm.
But yeah, that changed for me. That changed for
Hmm.
me, and it changed for me in that moment, because what I
Yeah.
realized is we put up barriers for ourselves when we go
Mm.
out and we seek. And it's almost as if we're seeking approval because we're not sure of ourselves, we're not sure of the
Mm.
direction.
Hmm.
And so part of it is not necessarily on the approvers or those perceived approvers, but even on
Hmm.
how we think of ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Do we have enough courage, conviction, experience, knowledge
Mm.
to know that it's time to move forward?
Yeah.
Another Amazon term, two-way door decisions, right? We think of
Mm.
two-way door decisions as those decisions that can be reversed.
Mm.
Those are decisions that you take, you move, you don't seek approval, you go, right?
Mm.
It's the
Hmm.
one-way door decisions that, yeah, you may have to escalate, go to
Got it.
your
Yep.
leader, but those two-way door decisions, you should always feel comfortable as a leader, as a professional, hell, as a mom or dad, right?
Sure.
Making those decisions and moving fast, as opposed to getting hung up in your own um, uh, just need or want to seek approval.
Sure. Sure. And wow. That is really good. It is one of the reasons why it's described as a two-way door decision, because even if you walk through the door and like it doesn't work out, that you can actually still come back out.
You come right back around. That's right. It's reversible.
That's amazing.
And there's not many decisions that are, if you think about it, there's not that many that aren't two-way door. We
I
may think
completely agree.
that they aren't, but they
Hmm.
really are. They're
Yeah.
reversible.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's such a key point. One of the ones that you brought up, and I want to reemphasize this for our listeners, because I would describe, you said, just it tends to be internal, has a lot to do with kind of our self view and self worth, etc. I like to describe it as personal integrity,
Mhm.
right? And for me, personal integrity is defined as keeping the promises that you make to yourself,
Hmm.
and how if we continue to make promises that we make to ourselves, that we can then show up as our full authentic self,
Right.
right? Because the example I always use is like, how many times do you say, "Hey, I'm going to be in bed by like 9 o'clock,
Mhm.
so I can be up at 5, have some personal quiet time, work out, eat, right? Be at my desk an hour before so I can review something before my meetings. And what happens? Inevitably, somebody tells you about a new Netflix series that you end up binge watching until 1, 2 a.m. Your alarm goes off, you hit snooze, etc. And then you've broken, 5 or 6 promises to yourself before 9 a.m.
Right.
And then you have compound interest over time, right? And just so you wonder why when you step into meetings or you have these potential crucible moments, you're not willing to speak up or take that action. And a
Right.
lot of times it's because you believe that by taking that action, everyone's going to know that you're a fraud,
That's right.
right? That it's somehow going to reveal that you're not actually who you say you are. And so once again, for our listeners, I mean, just so powerful. And we could probably go on about the two-way doors and stuff. I mean, that is wow. We don't have enough time to fully unpack that, but
Yeah.
that's unbelievable. Thank you so much for sharing that one. So so continuing, as you talk about those those two-way the two-way door type decisions, and the fact that there's really no decision that you can make that you can't really work your way back from, how can folks who are listening maybe apply that to their life, right? And
Mhm.
maybe even some of the logic that you just walked us through for before you make that decision, how do you begin to think through what are the potential outcomes, and what are some just exercises, if you will, that you kind of take to begin to think through strategic decisions that you're going to make about career or life
Mhm.
or anything else, well, from the premise of like, well, even if what's the worst case scenario, I guess.
Right. Right.
How do you think through those types of decisions?
And so I think you have to trust yourself first, right? There's no, I don't think, magic, there's no playbook on making decisions. I mean, all of
Hmm.
us think of the way we make decisions differently.
Hmm.
We're comfortable. I'm a planner, so
Hmm.
I do think it through before I ultimately make a decision, especially
Yep.
if it can impact others, right? If it's
Sure.
just impacting me, maybe a little bit quicker.
Hmm.
But one thing that I will call out is for listeners who maybe have analysis paralysis, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
running the same scenario over and over again, seeking approval, right?
Yep.
Because really what they're trying to do is delay taking
Mm-hmm.
action. Like those are the types of behaviors that you want to identify in yourself
Hmm.
and really seek to understand, well, why is it that I'm slowed down? Why is it that I slow myself
Mm.
down? Totally different when someone else is slowing you down. It's an external force. But
Sure.
if it's you, whether it's
Mm.
about your career, whether it's something personal, making
Hmm.
decisions for your children. I
Yep.
remember thinking through, should my husband and I allow our children to go back to school while COVID
Mm.
was still on the rise?
Sure.
And, there's
Big
faith,
decision. Wow.
there's
Yeah.
faith, right? Big
Hmm.
part of it. And then it's trusting ourselves as parents, right? And it's a
Hmm.
two-way door decision. We could always decide, okay, they're not wearing masks, or
Hmm.
just doesn't seem like, the safety precautions are in place. And so you take them out of
Sure.
school and you start to
Yep.
homeschool them and you do what you have
Yep.
to do. But if we were to stay in that place and
Yep.
run the same play over and over again,
Hmm.
look at the news and try to collect data, call
Please don't do
friends, right? Call Donnie, right, and his
that.
wife, and what are you all doing, right? And you
Hmm.
just get this, you get paralyzed by running the scenario over and over again. Like
Yep.
that's a behavior that I think folks should really consider. Is
Mm.
this something that is this something I can change, right? And
Sure.
it's a muscle that you have to flex.
Hmm.
This thought that you just trust yourself enough, you have enough experience and knowledge that you can
Yeah.
just move on a decision. It's a
Mm.
muscle. And it's for some people that don't work that muscle, it's not going to feel comfortable initially. But
Yeah.
once you get into the rhythm of it, right, and
Hmm.
it builds up confidence,
Hmm.
then I think it becomes easier over time.
Sure. Sure. That is very clear, and I think just concise in sharing it. And so, uh, man, there's so many places I would love for us to go, but unfortunately, we don't have all day. Moving forward. So as we wind down, um, you know, it- we already stated many crucible moments, in your career. I think I'm going to ask you something that I'm not sure I've really asked anybody else, moving forward. But once again, just as I've watched your career, while you may not have like a specific, next big dream, right? Like
Mhm.
maybe you're just, being present and obviously operating in excellence in your current role for this global organization, you know, would you mind sharing, what other, what is kind of your next big dream, kind of as you think about it, and that could be personally or professionally.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say personally, I'll answer it two ways, personally and professionally. Personally, I'm looking for freedom.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about getting free, and however
Mm-hmm.
you define that for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
I think about it often. Living in
Yeah.
the United States and wondering what it's like to live somewhere where you're not trying to keep up, right? You're not
Mm-hmm.
working just
Yeah.
to spend, right? You're
Yeah.
not always thinking about, okay, what do I need to do to be prepared for
Mm,
retirement, right? It's
sure.
just so there's something about getting free of some of the things that
Okay.
bond me now, just personally.
Sure.
And then
Yep.
professionally, I've always wanted to be at a large corporate foundation where we could
Mm,
just leverage these big brands to
hmm.
help someone. Simple
Sure.
things, simple
Okay.
but strategic things. And
Mm,
so I look forward to one day being in that top spot at a
yeah.
large corporate foundation doing, just great philanthropic work all over the globe and making an
Okay.
impact in someone's life.
That's powerful, man. And I would expect nothing less, frankly, from not only a big dreamer, but a person who is consistently over time just continue to put actions, towards it and turn so many, dreams into reality, the way that you have. LaDavia, thank you so much for joining. Where can folks find you? Can we follow you on Twitter? Can we find you
Yeah.
on LinkedIn? Where's the best way that, folks can kind of follow you?
So I have a Twitter handle and I'm on Instagram, but to be perfectly honest, I've taken a hiatus from, that more personal social media.
Sure.
And I'm
Okay.
on LinkedIn. I mean, that's where I
Okay.
post almost daily. I post today about our women's soccer team being able to achieve equal
Mm,
pay through a
big
settlement,
announcement. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just things that hopefully inspire other folks.
Okay.
And I also have in my role at Amazon a podcast that we're launching, and so folks will be able to
Nice.
see that all on LinkedIn, all on LinkedIn.
Well, hey, we'll put it in the show notes so we can direct people to you. Once
Awesome.
again, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today. A number of jewels that you've dropped, and I think will folks will be inspired as a result of you sharing. For everybody else, thanks for listening. This has been the Only Dream Big Pod. We'll see you next week.